Really lovely to see you all here today, and welcome to our Lunchtime Learning session. I'm Nicola McCormick, I'm COO for Pro Manchester, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's webinar. So first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping. I need to make you aware that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube after the session. If I could ask you all to keep yourselves on mute unless you're answering a question. If you want to keep your cameras on, that's fantastic, because it's always nice to see your lovely faces. And this session that we're about to experience, it's just a little taster of the Help to Grow management scheme, which I actually have recently completed. I just want to say it was an absolutely fantastic course, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So if you do want any more information, we're going to be sending that out afterwards to you. So now, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass you over to Rob.
Well, hello everybody. I'm just going to start sharing my screen, so hopefully this will work properly. So, Nicola, can you confirm that everyone can see that fine?
Yes, we can see.
Great stuff. Okay, so first of all, hello from me. So yeah, as it says, I'm Rob. I'm Rob McKay. I'm an enterprise fellow at the Business School at Manchester Metropolitan University. My main role is to run Help to Grow Management, which I'll talk to you a bit more about in a second. And I also develop some of the learning content for a program called Open SME, which is a Manchester-based program, which I'll give you a brief overview of as well. So just a little bit about myself and then the programs that I run. So I've been working in the field of professional development, leadership development, management development for 13, 14 years now within higher education. And prior to that, I spent about 11 or 12 years working in the field of economic development and regeneration. So I've spent the best part of a quarter of a century now working mostly with small businesses around a range of developmental issues. But underpinning all of that, I think, is the issue of growth and growth within those businesses. So Help to Grow Management is a government subsidised programme. It was announced by Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor as we were coming out of the first lockdown as part of the support that was being put in place then for small businesses. And probably the most generous element of that. Addressing really some of the sort of long-term issues around growth and development within small businesses. But what makes this different to a lot of programs that I've been involved in the past of this kind is that you've got your 12 workshop management program, which is a mixture of face-to-face and online learning, which is the sort of thing you'd expect from a management development program of that kind. But it's supported by this infrastructure of one-to-one mentoring, and what we call peer group learning, which is where we break each group down into smaller groups that work together on the application of the learning with a guide, with a facilitator. So very much focused on practical action. It's delivered only by a select group of university business schools who hold the small business charter, and obviously we're one of those. But it's very much about practical action for growth within the business. And every learning session is focused on, this isn't just a bunch of business school models to go away and ponder. These are things, these are tools that you can take away and apply in your business to actually have an impact on the bottom line. And those peer learning groups really discuss the ins and outs of individual businesses and how they are meeting those particular challenges and delivering on that growth opportunity. As a programme, because it's UK government funded, it has the widest possible eligibility criteria. Having worked for a long time on European funded activities, it's very nice to be in a room with people from things like retail, hospitality, as well as the usual sort of business services and manufacturing. So essentially, if you are between 5 and 250 employees, then you're kind of in. You've met the criteria. And like it says there, it's 90% subsidised by government. There is a £750 fee to the company, but that is quite a moderate sum when you consider all the things you actually get access to. So that's helped to grow. And today, talking about growth, we're just going to touch on some of the things that Help to Grow talks about, but really this is very much about the things you need to consider within your businesses if you're going to be pursuing growth as a strategy. Just a very brief bit about Open SME, which is a program that I'm also heavily involved in. So this is an on-demand 24/7 online learning and solution provider, which has been set up in coordination between all of the business schools in the Greater Manchester area and the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and Greater Manchester Growth Hub. There are 12 learning pathways on there. There's a whole bunch of downloadable tools, covers everything from pricing through to recruitment and application of new technology in your business. Lots of solution-focused, problem-oriented learning pathways, and then there's some other stuff around that. There's a discussion forum. We're about to release some podcasts, and we have some 2-day workshops later on in April that we are delivering. Much more geared, I think, over Help grow towards the smaller end of the business community. So you're 1 to 5 employees, but there's lots of really useful information on there. It's completely free, and you can register via that QR code there. So worth doing, even if it's only in the background for you. Okay, so let's talk about growth and growth in your business. And for me, I think there are 3 big questions that every business has to ask themselves if they're looking at growth as a way forward. First one is, where is that growth going to come from? Is growth even possible? Where is the additional income going to originate, and how are you going to tackle that? The second one is, how do you service the growth? What if you throw a party and everybody comes? Is growth the right option for you? What will you do with that growing demand? There's a whole bunch of operational issues that hang off that. And then finally, how can you sustain growth? What is your long-term strategy? What are you growing for? And what is the end point that you're trying to get to? So we'll work through these in turn. The first place to start, if you're looking forward, is to kind of look back. So a great quote from David Byrne, Talking Heads. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? And it's one of those questions that often goes unasked in a lot of small businesses. They'll pick over what went wrong forever, but very rarely do people actually ask themselves what went right and how do we replicate that success. So, put a question out to the room, and you can put your answers in the chat. Would you say your business has been successful so far? And if so, why do you think you've been successful so far? What is the reason for that success? And let's have a little bit of honesty. Is it something you've actively controlled, or has there been some element of good fortune in there? So I'm just going to open up the chat so I can keep track of what's coming back here. So I'm not saying anything yet. So does that suggest that no one believes they've been successful so far? I'm not getting much here at all. Here we go. So John said, a bit random. I think that's probably a tale that's been replicated many, many times, John. I think personality has helped you. That's an interesting one. I think it's also probably very true, isn't it? That especially when in the early days, the business is you and you are the business, then your personality becomes your brand. And that really does carry you forward quite considerably. Emma's saying, successfully we survived for 35 years. Absolutely. And indeed, anyone who's here now that didn't start trading in the sort of last 12 months and has been through that COVID period is a survivor. That's kind of written in. Catherine, fairly successful, but not very intentional. Absolutely. You know, the number of times I've spoken to businesses about their growth and the history of their business, and how much is purely sort of serendipity and good fortune is really quite remarkable. Michelle, so saying good testimonials, true, yeah. The thing with testimonials, though, is that they are very much written around the outcome. People are very happy with what they get as a result, and often don't sort of look under the hood and examine why they got to where they got to, either from the deliverer side or from the customer side. Market forces and luck and good marketing, yeah. So that was Jason, Ralph. Now, here we go. Having a plan, but a flexed one, and short, middle, long-term goals. And these change often, absolutely. It's a quote that's often been attributed to John Eisenhower, but actually goes back to the Prussian general Helmuth von Moltke, which is a name to play with. It's a quote that says, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy." The principle there is that you can have fantastic plans, but as soon as they get out there in the hands and interacting with people who have no vested interest in your plan succeeding, they will have to start flexing, because the world will act against it. There'll be friction and all sorts of factors which come in and upset your plans. So that flexibility is absolutely critical in terms of being able to deliver it and to be able to react to the world. But having a plan that you can flex is better than having no plan at all. So there's a slight irony within that. Okay, let's push on. So these are the poker tells that I tend to get when I'm speaking to people who run businesses. Have you been successful? Well, I guess that. I suppose. Thinking about it, looking back, all shows that actually what's happened has just been accepted and not really deeply analysed and picked over and really looked at in some detail. So here's the first takeaway growth tip. It's always worth reflecting and analysing on what has gone on in the past, because if you don't confidently know what has worked in the past, and more importantly, why it has worked, how can you know what will work in the future? You know, the past is not a 100% predictor of the future. Anyone who's heard or seen any advert for sort of financial services will always know that the small print immediately says past performance is no predictor of future performance. But understanding what has worked in the past and what has not worked and why those things have worked or not worked is really important. Again, I speak to a lot of businesses. They will tell you about the things that have been successful in the past. They will tell you about the things that didn't work. And they're often more able to analyse and elaborate on why certain things haven't worked. But very rarely do you come across someone who says, this worked really well in the past, and this is why it worked, and this is what we've taken from that, and this is what we're trying to replicate in the future. So I think one of those areas where working in higher education does help, because this is one of the things that we try and get onto as part of the learning that we do, which is to look at and try and understand the principles and drivers of what has worked in the past. You know, any good business school theory will be based on models. We'll try and act as a predictor of what will happen in the future. Okay, so let's talk about this first question. Where is your growth coming from? It's difficult, but it's worth repeating that we are in an exceptionally challenging business environment right now. So we've got the cost of living crisis, mostly driven by energy, but obviously by food as well. And that has knock-on impacts, which means that in general, everything seems to be getting more expensive. We've seen, certainly over the last sort of 18 months or so, a real issue with particularly small businesses gaining and retaining good people. Up until the cost of living problem really started to bite in sort of September of last year. Almost every business I spoke to, the number one issue was keeping good people, finding good people, and what to do with the people who were available and what to do with having good people who are looking at stepping outside the door and moving on to a different employer because something was being dangled in the mouth's where. And that hasn't really gone away. There are still issues with finding the right people to drive your business forward. Kind of related to that is the whole issue around post-pandemic work patterns. There is still a lot of uncertainty out there about how you balance work in the office and out of the office. If the pandemic and the lockdowns and the massive move to so many people working from home revealed anything, it was that an awful lot of managers were relying on essentially presenteeism and headcount as a proxy for productivity. That as long as there were lots of people at desks, then somehow everything was fine and it was all working okay. And you take that away, and suddenly people are on very uncertain ground in terms of what's happening in my business, where are we going with this, who's delivering what, can I rely on people? So we've had to sort of take a step back as managers and start thinking more cleverly about how we measure productivity, how we measure impact, and how we measure the capabilities and deliverance of each individual that's working for us. And then layered across all of that is regulatory framework uncertainty, which I'll be honest with my hands up here, is kind of a wordy way of saying Brexit. But there's more to it than just Brexit. But certainly Brexit has been the main driver of this kind of regulatory framework uncertainty. So there are so many aspects of business and business activity where we had an established order of regulation, and now things are much more uncertain. We are seeing trade deals being negotiated within which tariffs are important, but actually what is much more important is regulatory alignment and standards. So the combined effect of these four things is to create a business environment which is really quite stormy as a sea, and it's difficult to navigate. That isn't really in itself an excuse for not looking at growth, which seems quite harsh to say. But when you step back and think about it, many of the challenges that we've just talked about are universal across sectors. They are affecting you and they are affecting your competitors in more or less an equal measure, which means that there are opportunities. There are opportunities from being able to respond better than your competitors, and there are opportunities from being able to respond to your customers' needs better than your competitors. So, there's an old Chinese saying that anyone can captain a ship on calm seas. It is rough weather that really sort of identifies the talented captains. So business environments which are turbulent, which have this kind of uncertainty to them, which present these challenges, will sort the wheat from the chaff. Which kind of gets us to growth tip 2, which is that strategy is all about fundamentally survival. You can have a strategy for growth, but really your number one strategy is that this business will still be here this time next year. And when we're in tough times, you can find that you get organic growth just from being part of a diminished pool of customer options. Essentially, some of your weaker competitors will fall by the wayside. So the hard reality of that is you don't necessarily need to be the best in your sector, but you certainly can't get away with being the worst. It's a bit of a hard lesson, but I think it does stand up to scrutiny. Okay, my business school crust. So this is a tool that we spend quite a little bit of time on in the Help to Grow program. This is Igor Anthov Matrix. Bit venerable, originated sort of the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, and has been in and out of fashion, but it has proved to be a very good, robust tool for understanding what your growth options are, where your growth can come from. So Anthov says, look, there are two aspects really to this. One is the markets that you're operating in, and they can either be the ones you're already operating in now, or new markets, ones that you're not currently operating in. And then there are the things that you can offer into those markets, which will either be the existing products and services you have in your portfolio right now, or new things you want to add in or substitute in that are new to you as an operator. So that 2x2 option gives you this 2x2 matrix. And 2x2 matrices, as Nicola will confirm, enormously popular with business schools, and we've got thousands of things. But this is a really good one for boiling down what your options are in terms of delivery of growth. So start with that box in the bottom left-hand corner there, market penetration. So this is taking what you do now and who you do it for now and just getting more out of the market that you're currently in. Inevitably, that means gauging head on with the competition. There is only going to be so much that you can gain from your existing customer base. So that means that you're going to look at trying taking customers from your competitors, people who are in that market already but aren't necessarily on a customer roster. So there are limitations with this because eventually you're going to come head to head with the competition. One above it, market development, is about taking your existing products and taking them somewhere new, either to a new geography, which is the obvious way of doing it, or to a new group or segment of customers. So, for example, if you are from 1830, you might develop a new offering for the over 50 market. However you do that, you are trying to engage with new sets of customers. So there is an increased risk level there. Equally, come to the bottom right, product development. What you're doing there is you're bringing in new products, and you're advancing and expanding your portfolio to offer to the existing customer base. So again, further risk, but the risk level is actually less than market development because you're obviously working with a group of customers that you already have some good understanding of. And then finally, in the top right-hand corner there, you've got that red box, diversification, which is to offer something completely new to a completely new set of people. And obviously, because everything's new, the risk level that's involved in that is much higher. So your growth opportunities will come from a choice or selection of, one, getting more value from what you do now, which is your market penetration. Two, adding value with new products and services. Three, realizing value from new customer groups. Or four, starting something completely different. Now, the important thing about all this is that it's about getting value to your customers and deriving value from getting that value to your customers. So one of the things that we do on Help Grow is we spend some time working through business model canvas, which is a model of how you derive and deliver value to your customer groups. And we spend quite a bit of time actually going through that. But fundamentally, your 4 strategies for growth will come from within this list. Anything you can come up with will be one of these approaches. And what it boils down to in terms of where your choices are driven by the limitations in the markets you're operating in now, where competition might come from, what new markets are available to you, and what your appetite for risk is, and how you're going to be able to resource that growth. So there are some questions that you need to ask of the business if you're looking to pursue any of these 4 strategies. The first one is there a robust set of value propositions? Do you have a good set of values that you can offer to those prospective customer bases, whether it's the existing customer base or new market? Are you in touch with and understand what your customers really value? So are your value propositions based on what your customers actually put value on? And then are you communicating your value propositions in a compelling and resonating way? So is your marketing communications and is your marketing activity reaching out, speaking to the people you need to speak to in a language that resonates with them, that conveys the value that you can offer them? And again, these are all things that we cover on the program. One of the things I wanted to do very briefly, though, was introduce you to something called the blank formula. So I'm sure, looking through the list of attendees, I think there was the word marketing appeared quite a lot in either the business description or the job description of the attendee. So I'm going to work from the proposition that most of you have an idea of what a value proposition is. And that most of you probably have some value propositions already defined and within your business. But if you're new to this, A value proposition, as it says, is a very brief description of what your product or service means to the customer on their terms, and this is really important. Generally, a value proposition describes either what your customer will gain with your product or service, or what problems it will make go away, what pains it will remove. So gains and pains are the very easy way of remembering what a value proposition will offer. Now, one of the things that we do on Help to Grow is we actually work through looking at the value proposition through the Blank formula. Now, Gary Blank is an ex-Google executive who now operates quite significantly in supporting and venture capitalizing startups in and around Silicon Valley. And he came up with this formula to help those startups that he works with arrive at a compelling value proposition quite quickly. And we use this on the program to feed into the business model canvas to help explore that as a general proposition. Now, it works well at a sort of the company level, and if you think about it, a tech startup is generally a one product offering. If you've got a range of products, if you're offering a portfolio of services, or if you offer quite a wide range of products to your customer base, then this may not work quite so well. And we actually have a more sophisticated tool that we work with, the value proposition canvas, which is a much better tool to use at sort of product service level. The thing I like about the Blank formula is it's really quick, and for all businesses, it helps you generate a bit of an elevator pitch. So if you ever have that brief encounter with someone who might be of real value to your business, you can get across what you're about really quickly. Blank's formula, as you can see there, is we help X, who is your customer base, do Y. So what is it they are achieving? Are they gaining something? Are they losing some sort of pain? By doing Z. And that final part is, what are you bringing into that mix? What is it you're adding in that actually enables that value to be realized? So this is off the top of my head, so apologies to Nicola if I've got this up wrong, but this is one I've just quickly thrown together for Pro Manchester, where we help small businesses connect and collaborate by providing an event-driven networking space. So they bring small businesses together in an atmosphere that enables them to bounce ideas off each other, work with each other, and connect and hopefully drive their businesses forward in the future, either by trading relationships or by collaborative relationships. So if you've got no value proposition for your business, this is a really good way of putting one together and driving that forward. Don't do it in a room on your own. Get as many of your colleagues together as possible. And if you've got some long-term, good relationship-based customers whose views you trust, get them to help you shape it up as well. Get their perspective on what this is. Okay, so second question. How will you service your growth? Offering your customers greater levels of value is only half the job. You have to deliver that value. You have to deliver on the promises that you make through your marketing. And decisions need to be made on the demands that are created and the capacities and capabilities that you have to respond to that demand. Now, this may seem really obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many businesses miss this. When you start talking about growth, their minds immediately tend upon what's our marketing activity, what's our sales activity, can we get more customers through the door? The thing is, what if you throw a party and everybody comes? How will you deal with that growth if you generate the levels of growth and interest that you really want to? It is really easy to miss. One of the video case studies that we work through on the program is around Gymshark. Now, Gymshark is what they call a unicorn. So it's one of these sort of 1 in a billion companies that comes along that has super high growth, amazing turnover and profitability values, really high worth. It was valued at over £1 billion in 2021. And yet that business almost collapsed in 2016 by having a really good Black Friday sales period, which they were then unable to fulfill because they were still doing all their operational side of things in-house. And that's a really sobering thought, that a company that is that valued and that lauded in the business press nearly fell over because they could not deliver on what they had promised. And Ben, the CEO of Gymshark in the video, says it took them the best part of a year to recover from this period. It did a lot of damage to their brand. They had to rebuild relationships with customers, and it very nearly killed them. So the Help to Grow program, it's all about growth. We spend the first 3 modules talking about strategy, and then we talk about markets and engaging with our markets and building brands. But the second half of the program moves very much to the operational side, your people, your processes, your finances. Because if you do not have the mechanisms that you need behind the scenes, the back office side of things, if you like, to deliver on what you are hoping to generate through the front office side of things, or that outward sales and marketing activity, then things are going to go horribly awry. Just to sort of drive this home, if you think about the strategic choices based off the Ansoff matrix that I showed you earlier, and think about the broad operational capacity implications of each box, a lot starts to come out already. So there's the Ansoff matrix again. You've got your market penetration, product development, market development, and diversification. Market penetration is the #1 choice for most small businesses about growth. They sit down, they say, we need more growth. And the first plan is, well, we've got existing customers, let's see if we can get them to spend more. And then the second thought is, let's get some customers away from our competitors and bring them to us. By doing that, you're instantly saying, well, we have to have increased sales force and marketing activity. Now, that may require additional salespeople, may require additional marketing people, but it will require some investment in that activity, even if it's just having someone pick up a phone and taking orders. If you're going head to head with your competitors, you're probably going to get drawn into some kind of price-based fighting, whether it's outward price dropping, whether it's discounting on an individual deal, or whether it's offering some kind of payment terms to be more attractive than your competitors. Somehow money will come into the mix there. You've got to take into account the fact that your competitors will not just sit back and take this, they're going to fight back, and you may find yourself in a price war with prices being driven to the floor. And if it's really successful, you'll have supply chain pressures. You don't want to be picking up the phone to your supplier and saying, well, I've had a really good month and I need an extra 500 of these. And they turn around and say, well, there's only 150 in the country. And then you're suddenly having to move downstream and explain why your customers aren't going to get the things they thought they were ordered. So there are lots of things that sit behind this that make you think, okay, there are operational issues that need to be addressed here and need to be set up in order to meet the demand that we're hoping to generate. Market development, that becomes even more complex. So you've got the establishment in the new market. If it's a location-based market, if you're moving to a new geography, then how are you going to staff that? How are you going to resource that? Do you need to start opening up new property and new premises? Do you need to recruit locally? Is it insider knowledge? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to think about. Even with a sort of segment-based approach. So if you're looking at moving to a different market group within the geography that you're in, you're still having to find ways in which to communicate with those, focus on products where those people are, engage with them, and it will all take resource. You may well need to revise your marketing materials and the channels in which you communicate. And that again will require further investment in your marketing and sales activity. You may have to adapt the products or services that you're offering in order to meet the specific requirements of that new market. And again, once again, the supply chain issues. With product development itself, you may be looking at R&D costs. If you're not just buying in new offers from the manufacturer and selling on, if these are things that you're developing yourself, then that could be a significant time and money investment. There's market testing. Bringing new things in and sticking it on the shelf and hoping it doesn't work. You're going to start trialing things with customers who you think might be most responsive to this kind of offer. You're going to be piloting stuff. This takes time. It diverts staff resources. There is internal staff training to sell, deliver, and support whatever it is you're now offering. This is particularly true if it's a service-based thing. You're going to have to train up staff to deliver this new service. And you may have to develop new supply chain relationships. And then finally, the diversification, because everything is new from that. You can take everything in the list from market development, and you can take everything in the list from the product development side of things, And then look also at maybe new internal structures and processes if you aren't even setting up a brand new enterprise to follow this opportunity. So each of those 4 strategies will demand time, energy, investment, and money. So growth tip number 3, you got to pay to play. There is no growth without investment. Good leadership looks at minimizing the amount of upfront investment you need to make in order to achieve the growth that you want to achieve. On the program, we talk about things like minimum viable products and fail fast, fail cheap, which are really easy concepts to deal with. But ultimately, no one achieves growth without sticking their hand in their pocket to some extent. And as it says there, that can be in time, it can be money, but usually it means both. Critical decisions need to be made about the timing, sourcing, the capacity, and the loading of these investments. Where is it going to come from? When is it going to arrive? How does that relate to the demand that we are expected to service? And these are all quite complex decisions to be made. And one of the things that we try and do on the program is help people move through these in a methodical manner. So, third and final question. Is your growth sustainable? What happens after this initial surge? Where does it end? Are you growing to get to a certain point? What happens when you get to that point? Are you then going to grow on further? Are you going to sit at that point and just coast for a while? Are you looking at doing that for a while and then demarketing and pulling out of that particular growth area? Are you growing to get to the point where the inherent value in the business makes it a saleable entity and then you can retire and put your feet up? Ultimately, you need to understand what is your goal for driving growth, because if you don't understand where you want to get to, it makes it very difficult to plan the journey there. So, growth tip number 4, start with the end in mind. Think about where you want to end up, work backwards from there, and keep checking that you're still on track. So we had a reference to flexibility of planning earlier. Absolutely. Events will make you reconsider even where you intend to end up sometimes, but you want to be periodically checking in that what you are doing is still moving you towards where you want to be. It's very easy to be distracted, to have some kind of shiny opportunity come along which blows you off course and starts absorbing all your time and capacity. So I feel like I've whistled through that a bit. We've gone to about 40 minutes. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So let's stop sharing so I can see some smiling faces. Are there any questions? None yet. When's lunch? That's usually the first one. Thank you, John. Very kind. So we'll make the slides available as a PDF and we'll email that around to everybody. So you've got that as a reference point. Any questions about the program itself? Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Caroline. So I'll just ask if anyone's actually at the moment.
I think Michelle's just asked if she's
not based in Manchester. Okay, so with the Help to Grow program, absolutely. We are running a cohort starting in May, which will be based here in Manchester for the face-to-face sessions. There are 5 face-to-face sessions and 7 online ones. So with the online ones, you can be anywhere. In fact, one of our speakers was actually delivering a webinar for us from New York at one point. And I had a participant join us when they were on holiday in Mallorca, which must have been an interesting conversation between her and her husband. So yeah, absolutely. We've got more groups starting in the autumn, one of which will be based in Cheshire. So generally, I mean, it boils down to what is most convenient for you to get to in terms of those face-to-face sessions. With the Open SME, because it's GMCA funded, they like to ask us to pull out how many people are registered on that who are in the Greater Manchester area. But we have plenty of space, and we have had people from around the world sign up for that for a while. So until we are hitting the limit on our user numbers, which we are a long way from, if you're outside of Manchester but do a lot of work there, you are sitting there to sign up for that as well. So hopefully that clarifies that for you. Any more questions? Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. My contact details will be at the end of the slide pack that we send out. I'm always happy to respond to emails or messages and clarify anything there, or have my brains mercilessly picked.
And a huge thank you from us, Rob. That's been a really, really good session. I hope everybody else has found it useful and lovely to see everybody today.